Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. It's a joy and a pleasure to be here with you. Today we're talking about spherical harmonics. I have sort of discussed this before in previous live streams. I did a major discussion on spherical harmonics 2 years ago or 3 years ago in the previous old live streams. Many of the people who are here today have followed these mind-link sessions since the beginning, since way back in the beginning, and blessings to you for being part of this for so long. For all the new people, this will be new information. For the people who've been around for a while, some of this will be a review. The reason I'm bringing this back is because some of the information from the newest live streams puts a whole new light on spherical harmonics and the whole very complex mathematics of spherical harmonics. As a matter of fact, calculating spherical harmonics is probably some of the most difficult math to do. It's unimaginably complex. And a sphere represents the absolute number one primal shape in the universe. In any kind of weightless configuration, it's the reason why planets form themselves into balls. Moons form themselves into balls. Once you've reached a certain critical mass, then a sphere is what forms. If you can't quite reach that mass or become attached to a mass that's that size, then you sort of float around like debris or asteroids or comets or whatever. You haven't connected with a mass large enough to attract you so that you stick to it and become part of that sphere. In weightless situations, like in the space station, you put a blob of water and it floats around and forms a sphere. Basically, the spherical shape is what forms in your body, intracellular, extracellular fluid. Spherical shapes are everywhere. In some cosmology, the universe itself is a sphere among an infinite number of spheres of parallel universes in an infinite multi-dimensional universe. But calculating the area of a circle, pi r squared, is one of the more primal mathematical values in the universe. And then calculating that circle turned into a sphere where it becomes three-dimensionalized, where you're now calculating the volume of that sphere, gets much more extremely complex. Usually spherical harmonics is related to the outside of a sphere, like even, planet Earth. This is the primal shape, this right here. It's why the math is so important and why so much math is devoted to calculating spherical harmonics. A sphere is the ultimate acoustic space on the inside. So if you had a spherical room, the sort of the bounce pattern of the sounds inside that sphere would be unimaginably complex and incredible to listen to, the ultimate reflective space. I spent a lot of time when I first moved to California in 1988 with this idea of spherical harmonics, and I even tried constructing a sphere. That was a fool's errand because I was quickly to learn that the most minute discrepancy in your measurements begins to exponentially multiply itself out as the sphere progresses and becomes glaring inconsistencies where things don't fit together anymore, because way back in the beginning you were, a 1/16 of an inch off. That magnifies and magnifies and magnifies until it becomes untenable. But when we're talking about this concept of spherical harmonics, this idea that there are harmonic patterns that show up on the surface of a sphere. Most of spherical harmonic math is got to do with the surface of the sphere, not the inside volume. That's a separate thing, separate branch of spherical harmonics. But mostly when I was looking up on the internet, spherical harmonics, all of it was referring to the surface of the sphere and what happens there as harmonic patterns, octave and harmonic patterns that spin and show up all over the sphere. So these patterns are all, this kind of math thing going on. Patterns of reflections of harmonics that show up in various, very specific types of patterns. This is mostly what you see when you look up, websites that discuss spherical harmonics, and all of this, pages after page after page of this kind of unbelievable kind of math to describe something that automatically forms all by itself in a weightless condition. But all of it has to do with ratios of circumferences and areas and diameters and radiuses, all of these things form an unimaginably complex thing that has to do with spheres. Basically, it's this. I think, and last week or the week before that, a couple of live streams ago, I discussed the newest information coming through about the structure of black holes and the event horizon, which is also a sphere. And the outside edge of that sphere is the event horizon, and the very, very center is the singularity. And the same kind of spherical math is done on a black hole. I had mentioned that the universe itself, there was another article that I mentioned that talked about the fact that our whole experience and our entire universe may be just something existing on the surface of a universal sphere. That even though this bubble here is, the bubbleness of this bubble is just this thin membrane of soap held together with surface tension from water, the inside of this bubble is air and the outside of the bubble is air. So the bubble itself is just this surface area that's extremely thin. But if this was as big as a universe, then this thinness would be unimaginably thick to us in our size scale. And indeed, our entire universe would exist in the thickness of this thin little skin of a bubble of space-time. Actually, there is a whole spherical harmonic math about soap bubbles, and how soap bubbles join together that form what physicists look upon as how a multi-dimensional universe would look, and how these universes would form together and attach together. My idea way back in the late 80s, the Sphere project that I've mentioned before, although I wanted to have a perfect sphere, I realized how impossible that would be without major money. And back in those days, we didn't have the kind of high-level CAD design mathematical computer programs that could, make a perfect sphere on a computer screen like pretty quickly, and then transfer that over to some like machine shop that would make one for you. Like you could pop this thing up on the screen and you could do all these calculations and transfer them all out, and a machine shop would mill each one of these triangles perfectly so that they all fit together and make this perfect sphere. This is a geodesic sphere, so it's not quite 100% perfect curve at the edge. You can see that there's sort of straight lines between these points here. The more of these triangles that you put in place, the smoother the edge becomes. These are called single frequency, double frequency, and 3 frequency and 4 frequency spheres, depending on how many triangles you've got. I had grandiose ideas of making a very rounded sphere, way beyond my means. I had to sort of cut it back because I couldn't afford to make something like this. Turns out that somebody already did a sphere. Like I said, a spherical space is the ultimate acoustic space. There is a spherical room in Boston called the Maparium. It's got a map of the world on the inside out, done in stained glass, lit from behind, with a plexiglass bridge that goes across the middle so you can walk inside of this spherical room. It's in the Christian Science newspaper publishing building, this imposing kind of structure that's part of the Christian Science Mother Church, which sort of looks like the Vatican, right in the middle of Boston. Inside the Christian Science Monitor newspaper building is pretty impressive. And inside, around the corner, is this place called the Maparium. The Maparium. Stunning stained glass globe you can walk inside of. What you're not expecting is the acoustics inside this room. But as you can see, this plexiglass bridge goes across, and people can go inside, and people make noise, and the noise bounces around in all these mathematical spherical harmonic relationships, bounces around the room, and echo patterns sort of blow your mind. This is what that spherical room looks like from the outside, how it's sort of constructed. Pretty interesting. Pull the curtain back and bang, there you are. So my idea was to build a 3-frequency geodesic sphere like this one. This one, kind of a 2-frequency sphere, except a dome cut in half, is pretty much what you see in the playgrounds. They're very angular, and you can climb in and out of these triangles. A 3-frequency sphere is much more rounded, and that's the first one where it gets round enough to accomplish what I was trying to accomplish. But you can see that at each stage, like a 1-frequency, a 2-frequency sphere has a triangle inside of each triangle. 3-frequency sphere has 3 triangles within each triangle, and 4 inside of each triangle. So it exponentially multiplies up. A 6-frequency sphere has a lot of triangles. I was sort of dreaming of each one of these triangles would be a custom-made triangular speaker, so that the inside of this sphere space would be the ultimate acoustic space, where if you calculate the diameter of this sphere, so you calculate the diameter of the sphere And then you can calculate the radius to the center point, the distance from the outer surface to the central point of the sphere. And once you calculate the area of the sphere and the diameter of the sphere, you can calculate what frequency the sphere is tuned to, what sound wave, because sound waves have size, right? Back on that grand piano back there, if I hit C sharp in the second octave on that piano, one of the low notes, the sound wave is 1 foot long, like those sound waves go like this. Well, a low frequency sound wave has got size, so it's 1 foot peak to peak with C sharp in the second octave. That means C sharp in the first octave is 2 feet crest to crest. And as we march upwards on the piano, it becomes 6 inches and 3 inches, an inch and a half, as the frequencies get more rapid and higher. So back to the sphere here, if I can calculate the distance from the outer edge to the very center, that radius tells me the sound frequency that would have its wave be exactly into this center. And if I had speakers in every one of these triangles and they're all pointed towards the center, and I fired all of them up, the sound pressure wave from all of them would meet exactly at the same point in the middle, and we would get maximum pressure at that point. Theoretically, the first effect would be acoustic levitation. So if you throw a ping pong ball in there, when you fire up some music on your home stereo and you've got some nice big speakers with big subwoofers, you can put your hands in front of that subwoofer and you can feel air pressure waves physically impacting your hand. Sound has pressure. Sound is pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency. So now that pressure wave is coming out of all of these 270 speakers, triangular speakers, and the pressure wave from each speaker is all pointing to the same spot. And that spot is now building up a huge amount of pressure, and there's no place for that pressure to go because pressure wave from this side and this side are meeting each other and preventing sound waves from going any further. They're crashing into each other 360 degrees around. So if I threw a ping pong ball in there, it would go immediately right to the center and just hang there from the pressure wave. If I begin to manipulate the loudness of various of the speakers, so for instance, if I made all the speakers on this half go a little quieter, then that ball in the center would start to move over towards the quiet side because there'd be more pressure on one side than the other side because I turned the volume down on one side. So if I got really sophisticated with that, I could control individual speakers and move that little ball in any place in an XYZ coordinate inside that sphere at will, just by manipulating the loudness of various speakers related to the ones directly across from them. If this sphere was large enough that to put a person inside, theoretically, I could float you on a pressure wave and move you around as well, right? So there was another thing that I was interested in, and that had to do with if I crank the pressure up loud enough, then we're getting into some pretty crazy physics phenomena. At that point, we start to have a problem with the pressure. The pressure now is going to be building up pressure on the sphere itself and perhaps exploding that sphere out. So in order to neutralize that problem, I sort of envisioned that every other triangle speaker would be putting out the same tone but 180 degrees out of phase, which is noise cancellation headphones, right? So you've got a tone and its antitone 180 degrees out of phase. So every sine wave coming from one meets the sine wave that's going down where the other one is up, and they phase cancel out into silence. So the pressure is still there, but there's no apparent sound inside the sphere, just the levitation effect. So that's what that original sphere project, and I wrote a whole paper about this back in, I don't remember when, 1987 or something like that. When we start to play around with this idea of the circumference and the radius and the diameter and the volume within this space, a perfect sphere, not the one with 270 triangular speakers, but a perfect sphere made of something like titanium with speakers attached all around it, or even if you had no speakers, if you were inside that sphere and I just banged that titanium sphere with a big hammer, then the fundamental resonant frequency of that sphere is what would resonate inside that sphere. And everything would perfectly match right in the middle. So to tune a sphere properly, you take the radius and you figure out what that frequency would be so that the waveform meets exactly in the middle. Now, of course, other people have taken this idea to a whole different level in Las Vegas. And it looks, you know, some of the designs that they can project onto these giant digital screens looks a lot like the idea that I had in the beginning that I wanted to do. Kudos to them for what they've done. I mean, this is what it looks like on the inside, with the biggest screen you've ever seen that just makes everything look completely real. I think that's pretty cool. I can hardly wait to go someday. But essentially, think about, you know, this is a $2 billion sphere here. $2 billion. And they're having a hard time breaking even though they have record crowds coming. Just the price tag to build it is so immense that it's pretty hard to make your money back. It's going to take a long time, many years of these kind of crowds to recoup that kind of money. But when all is said and done, it's all got to do with spherical harmonics and the math that governs a spherical shape and a volume within a sphere. Now they're even doing acoustic levitation. And the most primitive forms is just two transducers facing each other, creating these nodes and antinodes, and the little ball will float right at the antinode place, where the sound pressure is large and the sound pressure is small. It's going to be held in that zero pressure zone. And if I turn this speaker down a little bit, then this ball would move up this way, because this one would still be full force pushing on the ball. So I should be able to move the ball up and down and up and down and up and down by adjusting the volume of these two speakers. From what I had envisioned with 270 speakers in a spherical arrangement, now I can adjust the sound waves of all these speakers, all pointing towards the middle, and whatever's there is going to float. And then if I can make these, you know, turn the volume down of these, then this would move down in this direction. This is an example of a technology that's also out there now. So they've gotten much more sophisticated. Here's this little yellow ball here. They can move this ball in any XYZ coordinate position that they want to now by having this many speakers. This was the idea I had back in the 80s. But I just didn't have the means to make it Ideas are cheap if you can't make them. But now we know that if I had been successful with the Sphere project, unknown to me that, if I already had sort of thought that if you have a spherical container and you fill it with water, then you've amplified the sound by 5 times, so that's going to be way more effective. So instead of, instead of air, if you had a full sphere filled with water, then all these sound waves would be magnified. Now we know that if you do that in a sphere, you get something called sonoluminescence, which I discussed in great detail in a previous live stream. The fact that you have 2 transducers facing each other attached to a spherical container filled with water magnifies the sound to a point where it creates a bubble that forms right in the center. And that bubble collapses. It's called cavitation, and creates a super bright flash of light that's hotter than the sun and brighter than the sun. And then forms another bubble, and that collapses and creates another flash. And then it expands again and collapses, expands again and collapses. And it's really a super duper rapid pulse that's so rapid you can't see the pulse. It looks like just a star in a jar is what they used to call that. And that's pretty much what it looks like. 2 transducers facing each other create this star in a jar idea. And the tuning of the tones coming out of these 2 speakers is a function of spherical harmonics. It's based on the radius to the center from the outside surface is what note these 2 are playing, so that the pressure wave meets in the center exactly and puts the maximum pressure at this point. But you can see how much more powerful it would be if you had 270 of these speakers all over the sphere, all pointing towards the center. Then the pressure wave in the center would be way, way magnified. And now you're in a position to create what I believe would be fusion, a fusion reaction. But in order to make the fusion reaction better, you wouldn't want to use water, you'd want to use heavy water. Deuterium has got extra electrons. So, in my opinion, they're approaching fusion all wrong. They're trying to do it with light, and light doesn't have a pressure wave. It has power, but I think sound is the way to go. And I believe that's the secret behind the Big Bang, that pressure waves collided together and formed a universally large explosion that we call the Big Bang. In the beginning was the sound. Later came light. In this case, sound is creating light, which is why I believe that sound is the primal force, and photons and electromagnetism is a spin from sound, not the other way around. Eventually, if you were to turn the loudness up loud enough, you should be able to open up a black hole, a time-dimensional window, and the possibility of a wormhole, which would mean some kind of warp drive. From the last broadcast, we talked about wormholes in the quantum fabric of time, space-time, that are connecting virtual strings from parallel universes and weaving the fabric of reality itself. And it's not just in a universal scale. It's within the proton of each atom in your body, which at its center is also a black hole, and more likely a wormhole. all of this idea of, when we talk about spherical harmonics, the harmonics we're talking about are the same harmonics we see that Pythagoras came up with the sacred monochord. That you have an open string to a certain note, but if you divide it in half and pluck each of these two strings, they're exactly an octave higher than this note. So if this note is 100 hertz, these are both 200. If you divide each of these in half, each of those would be 400. And you divide those in half, it would be 816 and 32. It was also Pythagoras that came up with the whole concept of harmonics, that 1/3 of the string, this is a harmonic third, this is a harmonic fifth. All of these fractional ratios to the fundamental is what music is. And you can sort of see that each of these waveforms fits nicely. So this one fits nicely in there, and these fit nicely in the other ones. They all kind of fit nicely in relationship to each other, and that's what pleasing harmonic relationships to our ear look like. But these kind of same frequency relationships, these nodes and antinodes, are what is forming on the surface of the sphere that's being calculated with spherical harmonics. This is one of the new articles where the mathematics of spherical harmonics is being has been shown to map directly onto our brain. And now there's a whole research approach of analyzing the spherical harmonics of the human cortex. And the spherical harmonics that we see as harmonic ratios that show up on the surface of the sphere are now showing up in the gray matter, the surface area of the brain. And I mean, look at this. Harmonic brain modes. A mode is a harmonic mode that shows, like the sand on a Chladni plate that forms patterns. Those are all modes. Harmonic brain modes, a unifying framework for linking space and time in brain dynamics. So when we take the structural connectivity of the human brain defined as a combination of local, cortical, gray matter connections, that's up here, gray matter connections. They're looking at an MRI. Elementary harmonic brain modes, defined as fully synchronous patterns of neural activity, are estimated as the harmonic modes of structural connectivity, connectome harmonics. Now, these are a little bit too small to see, but each of these harmonic modes on the cortex are different harmonic mathematical values, as we see in music theory, projected onto cortex itself, that match exactly what we see with fMRI studies and EEG studies of brain activity in various locations that seem to be related to other areas of brain activity at a distance. I discussed this a couple of times ago too, the fact that we've got various areas in the cortex that seem to be working together where there's no exact wiring diagram between those areas, is a function of harmonic resonance modes in brain function that can be mapped with an EEG brain mapping computer, and looks like these harmonic modes showing up in the brain. And where the harmonic modes would show up on the brain, or would show up on a sphere in spherical harmonics, you can calculate it on a sphere, map the sphere onto the brain, and you can confirm that those spherical harmonic modes that get mapped onto the brain hold water the same way they do on a sphere. That somehow, Spherical harmonics are directly related to brain activity in the cortex at a distance where they're synchronized up together, because that's what harmonic modes do. That's what happens when you put the sand on the plate and you put a frequency. It forms all these patterns that are mirrorized fractal patterns related to each other, where this mirrors that and this mirrors that. And it's like a geometric pattern that's got many, many parts, but all those parts look like each other, and they're all resonating in relation to each other because it's harmonic resonance. It's what the universe does. Except in this case, the harmonic resonance of various modes in the cortex is forming states of consciousness directly related to music theory and how the brain is working based on music theory and modes of harmonic resonance. Here's a blow-up of that picture so we can see it a little bit easier. Now we can see these modes. This is the fundamental and an octave and a third and a fifth and a seventh, and all of these things have reflective patterns of brain function. Connectome harmonics. Sort of mind-blowing. Elementary brain modes, connectome harmonics. Projection of spatio-temporal patterns of neural activity reveals the contribution of each connectome harmonic. Elementary harmonic brain modes to brain dynamics. So these modes that are working together in sympathetic resonance that all arise spontaneously based on music theory and harmonics, the laws of harmonics, is where different regions of the cortex are working together based on sympathetic resonance of harmonic modes. Various areas of cortical activity in the brain create something called functional harmonics that spin itself out into all kinds of different functions in the brain that appear to be separate, but now we know are all harmonically related to each other as a massive chord of function, where all kinds of different separate things that appear to be separate, the sensory and motor cortex in the brain, visual, attention, limbic system, emotions, default mode network I've discussed before, all of these superimpose themselves together in a connectome in the brain that is governed by the laws of harmonics that Pythagoras discovered way back when. That has to do with eigenmodes. Eigenmodes are the connected harmonic ratios that form in the sand as it resonates in a Chladni plate and forms these geometric patterns of relationship that arise spontaneously. We're saying that this arises spontaneously in the brain as well, and all these various modes that seem to be separate are actually deeply connected together, and what's connecting them together is music theory. It's the harmonics of consciousness. Functional harmonics reveal multi-dimensional basis functions underlying cortical organization. Functional harmonics, multi-dimensional basis, underlying cortical organization. This is mind-blowing stuff. Do brainwaves conduct neural activity like a symphony? Well, that's exactly what these articles are pointing out, that there's a symphony of harmonic modes forming in neurons in the brain in various locations that actually function together as a chord, as a piece of music, of the music of my consciousness moving forward. Frontiers of neuroscience. Spherical harmonics reveal standing EEG waves and long-range neural synchronization during non-REM sleep. So any state of consciousness that's not dreaming is what this is all about. Dreaming is a special case that reveals a whole new level of the kind of harmonics that are going on, but it's a very special case that doesn't seem to stand with how the rest of the brain works when it's not sleeping. That's what these guys are saying. But spherical harmonics reveals standing EEG waves. So now the EEG waves of the brainwave activity in various areas of the cortex are standing waves of resonance. Standing waves of resonance of spherical harmonics that are projected onto the folds of the brain of the cortex that form these eigenmode relationships of standing waves that function together, that appear to be separate but are actually working very closely together based on sympathetic resonance in the brain. Here we are. The sphere and spherical harmonics, all this stuff with spherical harmonics and all the math related to that is projected onto the brain and becomes a real world functioning of the neural cortex in relationship to various areas that are resonating in harmony with each other as a function of sympathetic resonance, of mathematical relations between different frequencies that form standing waves in brain tissue that equal EEG patterns that is closely associated with consciousness itself. It's like sort of just mind-blowing. Creation of spherical attribute image. The cortical surface of a hemisphere is extracted and attributes mapped to its vertices. Partially unfolded cortical sheet. That's what this is. Textured with mean curvature of the original sheet, which is the sphere. Complete inflation yields the spherical feature map. Map data were equalized for improved visualization. Nomenclature of vertices, neighbors, and angles of the sphere mapped into the noodles on the brain. The triangle on the left, the triangle mesh represents a part of an outer cortical surface. Cortical thickness is measured at the vertices of the mesh. Spherical coordinate system, north and south poles. I mean, it's like, what? Amazing. And it gets crazier than that. And this is what brought me to do this broadcast today, is this next section really starts to warp your brain. There was a couple of live streams ago when I talked about a new research project that showed that that although the cortex, the brain, is based on a self-similar design for everybody. Anybody's brain that you pull out of their skull and you take a look at it has the same kind of noodles in the same kind of arrangement that you can put names on. Like there's a big fissure that moves across the center here, and the noodles on the front side of that is the sensory cortex, and the ones on the back side are the motor cortex, and all kinds of other things that relate to the way these noodles are. However, no two brains are exactly the same, like a fingerprint. The size of these noodles and the depth of these sulcuses is unique to each person, like a fingerprint. There are natural variations of some of the noodles, but the overall architecture is the same for just about everybody. So what this present article is talking about, this next one here, is that as the fetus is growing, at the beginning stages of neural development, this is what the brain looks like. It's smooth. It's contained inside the skull. So as it grows, it's got no place to go except to create folds. And as it grows more and more, the folds get more complex. That doesn't explain how all the folds can look the same, brain to brain to brain, on everybody. And what this article is saying is that the eigenmode values of the spherical harmonics projected onto this brain are forming areas of sympathetic resonance zones that begin to guide the folding pattern of the cortex. So this pattern of the cortex is actually dictated by the pattern of standing waves of the harmonics of spherical harmonics projected onto the brain. They're responding to harmonic values of sound waves, and that's why the brain looks like this with all of its folds. How's that for a mind blower? This concept that the mystery of the folds of the brain, and the fact that those folds are now understood to be guided by eigenmode harmonic standing waves that spin from the basic universal math that governs spherical harmonics, that the brain itself represents the ultimate geometric form of all time, the sphere itself. This is sphere in action that is much more complex as the standing waves of the sphere mold the formation of these noodles, and the shapes and sizes of these noodles are directly related to the EEG patterns that arise there and forms my unique ability to be conscious and have a personality of a certain type. Rhythmic oscillations and resonant information transfer in biological macromolecules. Here's more. This one also just came through. The fact that rhythmic oscillations, based on the same math I'm talking about, spherical harmonics, patterns on a Chladni plate, is how resonant information is transferred in molecules in your body, that the molecules are mapped with spherical harmonics. Now, this is a little complex. I'm not going to read it all, but this manuscript is a concise review of a selection of key concepts concerning rhythmic oscillations in proteins in human cognition, human consciousness. The proteins, the biochemistry of human consciousness. All matter has an associated frequency, according to this formula. Or for the more realistic situation of an assemble of atoms, the wave packet dispersion, blah, blah, Planck's constant, in large organic macromolecules and biopolymers of the living system, there are multiple vibrational modes and oscillatory frequencies, the resonances of which can facilitate molecular recognition, coupling with field modes. Field modes means harmonic modes, electromagnetic and van der Waals interactions. Via harmonic rhythmic oscillations and resonances, nanosecond scale, intermolecular interactions, highly coordinated to orchestrate the myriad complex biochemistry pathways of the cell. Every cell is now mapped with spherical harmonics, and the eigenmodes that form standing waves of related mathematical harmonics excite the cell and govern the cell's biochemical processes the same way that it's doing with the brain and conscious processes of making different things work in synchrony with each other because it's forming a chord. This is saying the same thing is happening in all the cells in your body, rhythmic oscillations and resonances on a nanoscale, orchestrating complex biochemical pathways in the cell. Importantly, this field-like interaction is integral in information processing and exchange occurring at the molecular level that underlie cellular intelligence, network intelligence, and perhaps even sentience and consciousness itself. Consciousness and music theory, octaves and harmonics and standing waves forming themselves in the cells in my body to make me what I am, the cells in my neurons that are part of a bigger matrix of eigenmode relationships of standing waves in brain tissue that form brain waves and consciousness itself. Hidden linkages. Scientists find mind-body connection is built into the brain. Researchers have discovered a connection between brain areas controlling movement and those involved in thinking, planning, involuntary bodily functions like blood pressure and heartbeat. The findings suggest a literal linkage between body and mind and the brain's structure itself. Researchers named this newly identified network as the Somatocognitive Action Network, SCAN. This study may help explain phenomena such as anxiety-inducing pacing, the effect of vagus nerve stimulation on depression, and the positive outlook reported by regular exercises. This concept of vagus nerve stimulation is exactly what we do with sound waves and biotuning. Distributed harmonic patterns of structure, function, dependence orchestrate human consciousness itself. One article after another. What a mind blower. The music of the hemispheres. Cortical eigen modes as a physical basis for large-scale brain activity and connectivity patterns. Connectivity patterns in various locations that seem to be working together without being directly wired is all based on sympathetic resonance on the same math that governs why the patterns show up in the sand on a Chladni plate. Except it's mapped onto your brain and it creates brain waves and orchestrates states of consciousness. Neural field equations, connectome harmonic expansion of neural fields equations, brain dynamics described by neural fields. I mean, I'm not going to get to all this. Same stuff, same ideas. And then when we consider the fact that it's all a fractal hologram, that the brain connectome that we're talking about that is formed by eigenmode relationships of harmonic standing waves that forms brain waves and is associated with consciousness itself, conscious states, is reflected in the connectome between galaxies in the universe. The universe looks so similar and the math is so similar that the universe itself could be a giant brain. But it begs the question that there's some larger universal eigenmode functional relationships that's forming all these pathways based on music theory, the same way that the sand is vibrating on the Chladni plate, and that these patterns and the patterns in your brain are directly linked by eigenmode functions. That just as various areas in the cortex are sympathetically resonating together in a larger network, so is the brain itself and the universe itself linked together through harmonic resonance. Holobrain, a harmonic holography for self-organized brain function. These guys are no slouches. This is a medical imaging company. Is the universe part of a larger mind? All the indicators say yes and yes and yes. that what's going on in our brain here is just a harmonic reflection of a holographic pattern in larger mind. That the mind, that consciousness is not the thing that's contained inside of here at all. It's everywhere, reflected universally large. It's a non-corporeal thing that exists not just inside of me, but uses me as a vehicle for expression in a local manner. And now we're getting into more articles that talk about, the microwave background radiation from the Big Bang, that the remnants of the explosion of the Big Bang, if you, like back in the 60s, if you took a cathode ray television tube, the big old tubes that was a cathode ray with phosphors that would excite, and you darken the room, and you turn the TV on to like channel 13 or something, and it has no signal, and you get snow, and you turn the contrast all the way up, then most of those snow particles would disappear, and what would be left would be these dancing particles spinning around. That you were seeing was cosmic rays being picked up by your antenna, by your television antenna. You're looking at the cosmos bombarding your antenna from deep space. Cosmic background radiation is what was coming on your television set, a remnant of the Big Bang. And so here we've got the Big Bang with this moment of hyperinflation. And in the 10 to the minus 36 seconds, electrons, protons, and neutrons are all free. Then photons begin to coalesce out. And at a certain point at 380,000 years, it's cooled enough for helium nuclei to show up, and then hydrogen atoms to show up. And then as it cools more and more, we get this CMB radiation thing that's showing up in the background that I'm talking about. The CMB radiation is not, the background radiation that is seen as the backdrop of all of the things that are going on in the universe is not smooth. It's eigenmodes. It's spherical harmonics mapped onto the universe itself, where we have areas of the universe that seem to be synchronizing together. In some cases, I believe that's what spooky action at a distance is sympathetic resonance in space-time. But it's all based, once again, on sound waves and fundamental waves and harmonics of those waves moving through space-time from the Big Bang, dictating patterns, eigenmode patterns, the same patterns we see in spherical harmonics, superimposed on top of the background radiation of the universe itself. Where we have the Big Bang and inflation, and we've got all these fundamentals, and we've got harmonics that give us eigenmode patterns, same kind of patterns that we see on the surface of a sphere when we do the mathematics of spherical harmonics. Now we know those same spherical harmonics can be mapped onto the human brain and directly related to EEG brain function and consciousness itself. And now we can see the same mapping on the universe itself and the background radiation. We're mapping a giant, universally large brain and brain waves and consciousness of the universe. These are what the eigenmodes tend to look like on the surface of a sphere. The same kind of patterns, if you were to flatten this sphere out, you would see these kind of patterns in the background radiation or mapped onto the brain. That all the things that are going on in the brain are deeply connected to sound and music theory, standing waves, and the universe itself. Deep down in the center of your brain is a sphere. And sonoluminescence, call it a bright idea. The central characteristic of the place you go that you deeply want to find, and that all of us want to find when we go into a meditation state, when we conceive of the highest state of meditation that we could possibly get to, which is what we yearn for. There's an explosion of light there. All of it deeply connected together via music theory and harmonics and ratios. Deeply connected in ways we never thought of before. And we can connect ourselves together with these live streams. That's what this thing is all about, to resonate ourselves together into the same sort of mind space, mind sphere. So with that being said, here's our headphones. Get a sense of the connectome of us, our sort of non-physical standing wave connectome that we're forming together. We're making a brain and revealing a consciousness that we all share in. Here we go. Thank you all. I also want to use this opportunity to put on my hat. There you go. And to also toot my horn again for something that I came up with that they're just now discovering. You know, science discovers what all of the rest of us have known for 30 or 40 years. And they make a big hoopla about it, and the rest of us just roll our eyes, you know. But this is it. This is the newest book. I had to order it as soon as I saw it. Dysautonomia. Understanding Autonomic Nervous System Disorders for Physicians and Patients. Now we have a medical doctor who's finally discovered that imbalances the autonomic nervous system, the master system that tells all systems what to do, is the ultimate cause of disease. Duh, excuse me, but I've been doing this for 40 years, and I've got a really good system for doing it with real-time HRV, vibrational therapy, brain entrainment, sound. It works really well with every kind of condition, you know. So if stress is the ultimate cause of disease, we have an answer for the stress. So, thank you all very much for being here. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. Be happy and healthy and holy this week. I'm going to, as usual, leave the comment section open for a little while, and then let's all move over to the Discord channel. Thank you all very much.